Ron, how you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing real well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for doing this. Huge
Oh,
fan.
my pleasure.
So I've been a huge fan of yours since back in the day when I used to hunt and I used to just geek over cartridges and ballistic tables and energy numbers and
Hmm.
how far could I shoot an elk, and if as my range extended, then I had to look at different cartridges. But anyway, so oftentimes I'd be reading your articles and to see what was best for me.
Well, I hope I didn't steer you wrong.
Well, at some point I realized there's not much difference in all these cartridges, and they end up just there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, absolutely. It has more to do with your preferences sometimes in the rifle you want to carry. So many people think, well, this cartridge has to be significantly different from the next one or does something better. And those, as you said, are subtle. But if you can get a lighter weight rifle as a result, or perhaps a more accurate rifle, which isn't really a huge deal. That's mostly about the barrel and the action and all the rest, as you know, and your balanced bullets. But there are subtle differences that I think explain why we have so many different cartridges. Someone's always trying to just perfect some little aspect of it.
Well, I think as shooters, right? The end user, they as they start using whatever platform or cartridge or a combination of both, at some point they start to require different things, right?
Yeah,
Maybe longer
that's it.
barrels, maybe shorter barrels, maybe lighter rifles, heavier, whatever.
Yep.
And I think the manufacturers are smart enough to listen and pay attention. And it seems like every time they release something new, a new void is created that needs to
Yeah.
be filled in the future.
Yeah. Right. No, that's exactly what they're doing. Most people will say, oh, they're just trying to sell us more stuff and make more money. To which I always reply, well, of course, that's why they're in business. Do you really want the gun and ammo companies to go out of business?
You do a lot of this versus that uh, episodes in your channel, on your channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they are extremely interesting because oftentimes you compare the new with the old and find that there's very little difference other than like you said, a platform or whatever. They're minute differences. But what is let's start with your favorites. What is your favorite varmint cartridge?
Oh, it's long been the 22-250, but I pushed that to the AI version
Okay.
just because of the longevity of the brass. It tends to extend brass life, and there's less trimming involved, so it just makes life a little simpler. It might add 100 feet per second, which is no big deal, as you know. But once I picked up a fast twist 22-250 AI, was then able to shoot to 70, 75 grain bullets, 80 grain bullets, and just made that more versatile. And the interesting thing I learned about it was that I could still shoot very accurately 40 grain hollow points. I had a box of old Spear 40 grain hollow points, and I used them when I was fireforming brass. And I was just piling them right into an MOA without even really trying. I was just pretty quickly cycling through trying to get my brass. And when I got done, I had just one ragged hole in the paper. So, this talk about, oh my gosh, your twist rate's too fast to stabilize your shorter bullets. I didn't find that to be true in that case.
Yeah, you're better off being over twisted than under twisted, right?
Are you suggesting that I'm twisted?
Maybe slightly.
Maybe a little
Uh,
disturbed, huh?
uh, it's surprising that you say that because 22-250 actually was my first ever custom rifle. Like the first time I had a rifle done, it was a 22-250 AI. And
Uh-huh.
I had a lot of fun with that thing. I just wanted to go fast. I was like Ricky Bobby. I just want to go fast.
Yeah.
And my needs changed. But anyway, so 22-250 is your favorite varmint cartridge. What's your? I assume you don't have just one rifle. I assume you have
Yeah,
multiple.
there would be maybe two or three of them floating around.
So what's your? If you're gonna go for, I don't know, whitetail, what do you reach for?
Oh boy, Eric, I'm not a good person to ask that question because of my job as a rifles editor at Sporting Classics magazine and a columnist here and there, and just what I do. I have to have significant experience, so I'm always experimenting with new and different rifles. And if I were left to my druthers, I would probably go with a 284 Winchester that I have in an ultralight arms model 20 for a couple of reasons. One, of course, is I think the 7 millimeter is sort of the optimal caliber for most of the game we hunt. You know, it's not too big, it's not too small. You can get extremely efficient bullets without having a lot of recoil. They're just pleasant to shoot, and excellent ballistic performance. And then when you start thinking about barrel life and cartridge life and everything else, short action versus long action, boy, much as I love the 7 rem mag, that 284 pretty much does anything and everything the 7 rem mag does. I haven't noticed any animal I shot with a bullet out of the 284 acting differently than any that I shot out of the 7 rem mag, several hundred feet per second faster. So you get to the point where you ask yourself, why do I need to burn all this powder and take the recoil? And not that recoil bothers me all that much, but little things add up. So when I started shooting that ultralight arms rifle and field ready, it was 6 pounds or just under. And that's with a sling and a scope and everything, loaded magazine ready to go. So easy to carry and whip into action. And most people will say, well, those super light rifles like that are not accurate. They're not steady. They're hard to hold and control in the field. And I found it to be just the opposite. Straight up, that rifle would shoot half to 1 MOA with most loads that I built for it. It's a little bit fussy with some loads and some bullets, but I could always find something that would shoot MOA or better with it. And as you know, for hunting, that's going to carry you well out past any sensible shooting distance. But the other part was how effective it was from field shooting positions, whether it was sitting, a quick little sitting shot, or sometimes even standing shots. I could just put that little rifle up, and it wasn't really muzzle heavy. It's beautifully balanced behind the hands, just in front of the magazine box or the trigger guard right at the magazine box. And it just seemed to hang on target so well. And I really discovered that once when I was calling coyotes during a deer hunt. I would hunt deer in the plains and prairies, and if I saw a situation that looked like it would be a good place to set up to call a coyote, and I had the truck with me, I would put up the 284 and grab the 22-250 for the coyote. And that one occasion, I kept the 284 and had just gotten done using the 22-250, and I noticed how that 284 seemed to want to hang on target better than that Ruger I had in a 22-250. Now, part of that, of course, probably most of it, was the balance of the particular rifle. But again, that's why I fell in love with that Model 20. It just held on target beautifully, and I made shots out to 400, 450 yards in the field with that little rifle for sheep hunting and goat hunting and all that sort of thing. So over the years, I just fell in love with it. And I guess if you told me, Spomer, you've got to go whitetail hunting tomorrow, I don't care where it would be, whether it's in the thick forests or up in the plains country, I'd grab that one.
It's interesting that you like the 284 Winchester because that is precisely the most used cartridge in F-class long-range shooting. 284 Winchester.
Heard that.
It is just so well balanced between ballistics and recoil and all of the above.
Yeah.
We use it a lot, and it's extremely accurate, as you said. It just seems to be a very happy performer, and it just shoots. And like I said, 7 millimeter. It's got plenty of energy to take just about anything you want to take.
That's sure been my experience. Now, in your F-class shooting, what bullet weights are you using? Getting up into the 180s?
Yeah, 180 is the most common.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys are trying to push the 190s. Berger makes a 190, but typically 180, 184 is the most used bullet weight for the 284.
And what kind of velocities can you get?
Well, we can push them quite hard, but we use some very long barrels, 32-inch barrels.
Ooh, 32. I was thinking 28.
Well, no, 32. We push them all the way up to 32 because in F open, which is open class, you're allowed the rifle to weigh 22 pounds. So might as well just have a
Yeah.
longer barrel. But you know, the 284 typically pushing on the upper end about 2850 feet per second. But most guys shoot it, you know, like around 2770, 2750, you
Hmm.
know, 28, 25, somewhere in that range is where most people shoot the 284, and it shoots really, really good.
What are you getting on your BCs? Go with the G1 BC on that 180 grain bullet. You getting up to the sevens?
I don't think we're up in the sevens. I don't honestly. I don't pay attention to BC because we have known distance targets. We shoot 1,000 yards, and yeah, I mean at some point you need to kind of look at BC, but the 180 hybrid is a very very high BC bullet already. You're not gonna get much better than that, but it's also extremely consistent. For us, consistency is better than just ultimate
For
BC
sure.
numbers.
Yeah.
But I think it's in the 600s.
Okay.
I don't think it's getting up into sevens for the G1, but it's still up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 284 is by far the most common,
Hmm.
or in sevens. Period. I mean, if it's not the guys that are trying to, you know, hot rod a little, they go to the 7 short action ultra magnum, or the new darling in F Open is the 6.5 PRC necked up to 7 millimeter.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's it's got less capacity than the 7 short action ultra magnum, but again, it's more than 284, less than the short action ultra mag, but then obviously Lapua is now making brass for it, and
It helps to have that nice brass, doesn't it?
if Lapua, I might as well say it correctly, if Lapua makes brass, competitive shooters are gonna flock to it, you know. So and
Yeah.
it's a very good cartridge. That 7, we used to call it the 7 PRC, but now Hornady released an actual 7
Oh yeah, I
PRC.
can't do that.
So I call it the 7 PRCW because Alex Wheeler is the one that kind of designed it for, you know, that's where I got the design from. So that's
Hmm.
why I just added the W at the end.
What are they keeping a 30-degree shoulder on that?
Exact same thing. All we're doing is necking up to 7
Check it
millimeter
out.
and stuffing a 180 grain bullet in there. And, you know, we're going 2950 or so, 2930.
Does the neck length on that reach full caliber?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a perfect cartridge to just simply neck up and send it.
Oh,
You know,
easy.
you'll get about 200 feet per second on the max on the higher end. You can probably get 200 feet per second more than the 284 Winchester.
Hmm.
But obviously, we don't push it that hard. Mine are running about 20. I have one that's running pretty hot. It's going to think 2970, but most of them are running about 2920, 2930,
How
which
long do
is
your how long does your brass last at those pressures?
that's the thing. So far, it's showing like it's gonna last quite a bit. I think I have 10 firings on
Wow.
brass, and it's still the pockets are still very tight.
Wow. That's quality brass for you, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And we do a lot. Well, at least I do. I neck turn and sword
Uh-huh.
brass and all that. So yeah, I want it to last because you know this is brass that's has a lot of work that's been put into it. But there's been a lot of people nowadays that are actually competitive shooters that are moving to no turn. Literally just open it up and just
Really?
have a big neck, just almost like a factory rifle would have.
Wow.
And that brass, that Lapua brass, is so good that they don't have to do anything.
Wow.
So
That's,
very
that's
interesting
nice.
times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how far we have pushed this game and the tools that we use. Most people, average shooters at least, never consider the brass case itself as being a critical component to accuracy. It's just, well, this here it is.
We have what we call the 3 Bs: brass, barrels, and bullets. If those three are top notch, you're gonna have a pretty good performer.
Yep, I can believe it.
So the 284, as you may be aware, Lapua makes brass for it now, and
Yeah, I've heard that.
it's because of the competitive shooters.
Sure.
But But anyway, my I'll tell you when I used to hunt. I'll tell you what my favorite used to be. I used to hunt down in South Texas. I had a deer lease down there, 10,000 acres down in South Texas.
Hmm.
Oh man, that was good times because I'm sure you're aware with South Texas whitetail,
Yeah,
and to have 10,000 acres to play on was very fun.
that's a big chunk.
So I had two. I had two. They were both 7 millimeters. My kind of everyday carry before the trophy season was a 7 millimeter '08,
Uh-huh.
and it was on a Remington 700. I forget what they used to call this rifle, but I think it was like light varmint super sport or something
Hmm.
of that nature. Very handy rifle, 20 inch barrel. And
20-inch barrel.
yep, it was a 20, maybe 22, but it was a short, handy rifle that I could, pretty much a truck gun. I
Yeah.
put in the truck, and if I had to shoot hogs, javelinas, coyotes, whatever, that stayed with me. So in the off season, I'd carry the 22 250 Ackley. When the season started, I started carrying my 708
Yeah.
because we couldn't shoot. The rules in that deer lease were you could not shoot trophies until after Christmas. So
Okay.
from November to mid December or so, I'd carry my 708, and I'd
Hmm.
shoot pretty much everything with that. And then once the trophy season started, where if I saw a trophy and it was far out, I wanted to take it. So
Sure.
then I'd carry a 280 Ackley improved, a custom rifle that I had built, and
Yep.
that was my long range shooter, you know. But
Oh,
that was my arsenal, and then the other one that I had was a 300 Win Mag, and that was mainly for elk when I go to Colorado. But
yeah. Boy, it's really interesting because my next one would have been the 280 AI. I had Lex Webernick at Rifles Inc. built me one of his Strata stainless, and that
mm-hmm,
was another sub 5 pound rifle. I think it was about 4 3/4 pounds or something naked, and that one had a little bit longer barrel, but it was pencil thin, had a break on it, which I didn't like, but I could, of course, take it off and cap it. But that thing shot half MOA with the original Barnes 140 grain Barnes X bullet. This was back in 91 or 90 or something like that. So I started switching between the Ultralight Arms 284 and that 280 AI. And again, the animals never knew the difference, but gosh, I shot that thing out to 450 yards on various things too. Just so consistent and accurate at once. Didn't carry quite as easily as the ultralight arms because the barrel was a little bit longer, it's a little bit muzzle heavy. And I remember when I would carry it on my shoulder, it would want to roll back on me
mm,
because of that weight difference. But boy, once you brought it to bear on a target, you kiss it goodbye because that thing was going to deliver the bullet where it needed to go. And I used it for everything, including moose and elk. So you and I seem to be thinking a lot, Kara.
uh, well, it's about efficiency. I learned that early on. So I did not start that way. I started with the super fast, 7 Remington Magnum and 264 Win Mag and all. I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to go fast,
Yeah.
and it wasn't long before I realized that I would miss a lot more with those big boomers than I did with my 708 and my
You think it
280
was
Ackley.
you think it was anticipation of recoil?
I don't know. That's what I'm assuming now. At the time, I was not very experienced. I just, again,
Right.
looking at ballistic tables, I thought, well, you can't go wrong with this.
Yeah, right.
And but it could have been. But once I dialed back a little with a 708 and things of that nature, it was. I was so two things happened. I believe number one, I was more experienced, and number
Mm-hmm.
two, it had less recoil.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have success, right, you get more confidence, and
Oh,
confidence gives
absolutely.
you more stable shooting
Yeah.
positions, right, than if you're
Yes,
nervous.
absolutely.
So I think it was a combination of all of the above. But I once I had that 708, I was on. I used to shoot 150 grain Barnes triple shock or 140s. I think 140s, and again, just anything South
Yeah.
Texas, I'd take with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I use that 140 grain a lot in all my sevens, really. I mean, that Barnes X bullet is just so dependably consistent with its weight retention.
Hmm.
If you've got an accurate load for your rifle, you know that 140 grain bullet is going to have the terminal performance of probably 160 or so equivalent in a lead core bullet, especially a typical core bullet. You get a controlled expansion bullet like, say, a Swift A-frame or even some of the bonded bullets, and maybe they're a little bit closer. But your traditional cup and core bullet, you got to add a lot of weight to it to get the kind of penetration performance you get from a much, much lighter weight Barnes X bullet of any kind. Been my experience.
Yeah, they're good. I used to use them on everything. My 300 Win Mag, I used to, I loaded 130 grain that Barnes bullet on that 300 Win Mag
Yeah.
at a stupid
Smoking.
velocities, and it was so fun. But that in that 280 Ackley improved, I loaded 160 grain AccuBonds
Oh,
because again that was my long, a long range shooter. So I wanted something that would expand reliably uh, on long shots. So
sure.
I ended up never needing it, but I just wanted to be ready.
Yeah. Well, that never needing it part, that's significant because I've gone the same route. You get the fastest, flattest shooting with the longest, highest BC bullets you can. You just all geared up for those long shots because you're going out west somewhere and you just know you're gonna have to need that. I did that once with a what was a 6.5 280 Ackley improved. What did they call that? The blowhole or something? Some guys out in Oregon, old Chub Eastman, I think, was making it, and he called it the blowhole or something like that. But obviously, it was really fast. I think I was pushing a 140 grain burger at 3150 or 3100 or something. It was smoking. At any rate, I was all set up for this long shot on this big mule deer in Colorado, by golly. And of course, once I saw the deer and I started stalking it, me being me, I've always loved stalking deer, and I saw that it was pretty easy. The wind was right, and there was plenty of cover in the sagebrush, and I always get closer. It's just a sensible thing to do. Why risk it? And I had that rifle, and several times I stopped and I looked and I thought, hell, I could smoke him from here. There's no problem. I can hit this. Hell, I can get a little bit closer. I ended up getting my shot at about 180 yards on him. Then I look at all this fancy load I worked up for this super fast bullet, and I didn't even need it.
Well, that's part of hunting.
Sure is.
We, South Texas, I used to shoot hogs, and I use hogs as my target practice slash, we need to get rid of them anyway. But
Yeah.
some days we say, well, today we're gonna get close, and that was the game, right? It's like, let's see how close we can get. And some days it was like, well, let's just get rid of them. And
Yeah.
then the minute we saw them, we'd stop the truck. And by then I was already a long range shooter, doing competition. So
Hmm.
the shots were getting a lot easier, at least for me to make them. And I took them all the way out to 700 yards just for fun.
Oh yeah. Well, it's great way to train. And I used to say that about varmint hunting, whatever rodent it was you were trying to control, from prairie dogs and Wyoming ground squirrels up to the chucks, woodchucks and rock chucks and whatnot. And one of the reasons I think for taking care of a problem like that with a rancher is getting to really know your rifle and understand the wind deflection, your drops, and all the rest of it. Of course, back in the day, we didn't have a laser rangefinder. So you needed that velocity to flatten your trajectory and pick up another 20 or 30 yards in case you misjudged the range. So all of that was definitely educational. It's a great way to train.
That was also a great way to realize that you did not really want to be shooting anything worth shooting at that distance, because
Yeah,
you realize real
excellent.
quick that regardless of the ballistic tables, that 700-yard shot is not an easy shot.
Yeah, and you don't generally get to kick up dust for two or three shots as you walk it in on a
Yeah,
big deer or elk or anything else, nor do you want to risk wounding it.
correct.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. I'm sure it's the same with you. It's this is a big serious deal out there, guys. This is a very significant animal, and you want to do your job right as a hunter and a shooter. You're not just out there playing targets with these animals. This is a serious business. So you want to do things as right as you possibly can. And and I argue this a lot with guys. I don't know if it's an argument really, but I just always like to make the case when they're saying, what's wrong with shooting an animal at 600 yards if I can do it every time? Well, okay, I get you, but you know darn well your chances at 200 yards are a lot better than they are at six, especially because of the time of flight. Whether you do everything perfectly or not, that animal can move. And that half second or more for those really long shots can get you into trouble.
The I can do it every time argument is a tough one because they can't do it every time. They just don't know that.
Well, according to what I read on the internet, they can.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a competitive shooter. I shoot 1,000 yards all the time. I mean, I have championships, multiple championships under my belt, and that has really told me that 600 yards is not 100% shot. It is not
Yeah.
because it's a moving target. Number one, it is a moving target. It even when it is stationary, it can move at any time.
Yeah.
So that in itself makes it unpredictable, right? And if you shoot enough competition, you're going to find out that sometimes you have what we call flyers, which are unexplained shots.
Mm-hmm.
Not every shot goes exactly. I mean, you can be shooting, in our competition in F class, we shoot 20 shots. And in those 20 shots, they may all be, inside of 3 inches at 600 yards. And every now and then you get this one that just goes a foot outside of that group. Well, how do you? And now we're talking like these are purposely built competition rifles.
Sure.
I mean, they're heavy. They have very light triggers. They have the best hand loads that anybody could produce. It's still we have these wild shots every now and then. Well, how do you know that wild shot is not going to happen to you? Forget the stress, forget the unstable position, forget the point that the animal could move at any time. If everything was perfect, you could still get a flyer.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's where the I can do it every time argument kind of falls apart because you should be able to do it every time. But I'm going to say it's next to impossible to 100% of the time have everything lined up perfectly always.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. And I've heard that from a lot of competition shooters who just sniff at this idea that somebody is good enough and has good enough equipment that he can guarantee a first shot hit, cold shot every time. Just doesn't happen.
It's very tough. And like I said, the more you do it, the more you realize how hard it is.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're doing pretty good. 280 actually, or 280.
284.
284. That's right.
Took that one from my general purpose whitetail rifle.
I didn't even know about 280 back or 284 back in the day. It's I think Winchester kind of had a they literally had a home run with that cartridge, but didn't they release it into like a pump action or something like that?
It was 1964, and it was an auto loader, the 100 model 100,
something of that nature.
That modern lever action that had a vertical stack magazine, kind of like a Savage did. So they were sticking with the lever action because back in the 60s, most guys were shooting Marlins and Model 94s and 3030s, but obviously you needed a better bullet and a pointed bullet. So they came up with this vertical stack magazine in the Model 88. So it's kind of a modern looking rifle, and it did similar things to what the Savage 99 did. But I think because they stuck it in that auto loader, they were thinking for extraction purposes and whatever, we're going to kind of keep the pressures down, and they loaded it down a little bit. I forget what the allowed pressure. I think it's only 58,000 PSI on that from the factory loads. And then they just, I don't know, nobody, I know Browning chambered it for a while and Savage chambered it for a while, but I don't think anyone else did. And that certainly didn't help.
It's a shame, and of course, looking back, we're hindsight's 2020, and maybe doing the long range cartridge at the time was too far ahead of its time.
Oh yeah, I'd say definitely there.
So, and this is kind of goes back to our initial discussion about they release something to fill one void, which in turn creates another one that must be
Hmm.
filled later. And I don't know. It's an interesting it's interesting dynamic between the manufacturers and the customers, and it seems to go back and forth. And at some point, I just sit there and watch it, and as a competitive shooter now, I hardly ever hunt anymore, and I sure never buy factory rifles anymore, unless we are using them for testing on our channel. But
Hmm.
it's incredible, or for me, it's very interesting to see the dynamic of like the 6.5 Creedmoor. Just this savior of a cartridge that can do it all, right? And I'm sitting here going, we've had the 260 for a very long time. you know,
You noticed that too, huh?
uh, and then they released the 6 Creedmoor, and this is the next best thing in cartridge technology. And I'm like, I used to shoot a 243 a long time ago, but it's just repackaged, make it a little sexier. The
Yeah.
shoulders a little sexier. The marketing is different, but the biggest thing is the barrel twist,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah,
they
that's what
release.
made the big difference on that one.
Yep, they released these barrels with fast twist, with they can shoot this really long bullets that now are seated way out there instead of shoved down into the case. They just
Yeah.
look much
Yep.
sexier, and you know,
I think that's exactly why the Creedmoor took off. That and some really good marketing. But they addressed all of those little tweaks that you would do as a custom or wildcat designer. They just had, by then they knew how long should the neck be, and what sort of an angle do you need on your shoulders, how straight is the wall going to be, and you want your bullets seated out for, let's throat it long, and then let's put the fast twist in, and all of that was made possible by the rangefinder. Before the laser rangefinder came out, it really wouldn't have mattered, because nobody knew if that animal was 420 yards or 506 or what. And there's a big difference in those distances. So if you can't nail it down exactly, it just doesn't pay all that much to have those super high BC bullets.
that is very interesting that you say that about the rangefinder, because it is true. The rangefinder extended, at least on paper, the
Yeah.
range of every hunter out there.
Yeah. Yep.
You
That's what
know,
it did.
this, they say, well, if it's 400 yards, and target scopes, I mean, they are plentiful now. Back when
Yeah.
I was hunting, this is back in the 90s. If you wanted a target scope, you take a Leopold, you send it off to Leopold custom shop, and they would put target turrets on there for you. That was the extent of how you managed to do that.
Yeah.
There was very few scopes that were, target scopes, especially the second focal plane that we, for hunters we had to have, right?
Right.
And then I remember I had a Nikon scope on my 300, whatever rifle I had it on. I had a Nikon scope, and then when I started learning about shooting long range, I learned about you gotta, the easiest way just simply to dial, because that scope I bought it with a milled dot reticle, because that's what the snipers used.
Hmm.
I would do so much reading, but it had MOA turrets but milled dot reticle, so it was
So
just a confusion. So after a while, I realized it's easier if I just dial it. And I remember calling, Nikon and asking them, "Is your scope made to dial?" And I had no idea how to ask this question, right?
yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, of course. It's made so you can sight it in." I said, "Well, no, I don't mean sight it in. I mean click that scope up and down like crazy. Like if I want to shoot long range." And he says, well, no, you sight it in at 100, and then you just hold over the back or whatever. This is literally what they're telling me. And I'm going, it wasn't long before I realized I'm not talking to the correct person. So,
Yeah.
and then I said, you know what? The best thing to do is to get a dedicated target scope,
Yeah.
which at the time was not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. No doubt. I mean, it took, as you saw there, it took even these scope marketing agents and whoever you were talking to, it took them a long time to get this stuff figured out too. because it was so new that they had no idea. And I can still visit with some folks in the industry and ask them some fairly technical questions to which I don't know the answer, but it's one of those things that pops up and you go, I wonder why, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll ask them and they go, I don't know. And they're supposed to be representing this fancy scope brand. So I don't think any of us can assume that all the information and the knowledge is already out there and somebody has it. Likely it is, but we're discovering new things. And I think with scopes early on, when they realized what that laser rangefinder could do for you, then they had to start to think about, now, wait a minute, if we can turn a turret to shoot higher or lower to sight in, why don't we do it so that we know exactly how many clicks to dial to have our new sight in at 300, 400, 500 yards? Hey, yeah, let's just figure out how many clicks we need for that. Oh, and then the next thing is, why don't we put that number on there? So we go click, 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 click up to number 5, and that actually means that's the hold for 500 yards with the particular load you're shooting. And all of that stuff had to evolve. It didn't just come down from on high on plates of stone that somebody walked off the mountain with.
And then the shooters themselves had to be educated. And then every time a new development happens, then, for example, BDCs, that's the bullet drop compensators. They were very popular at the time. You could actually have a turret made specifically to match your ballistics to where, like you said, a 5-man 500, a 3-man 300, and things of that nature. And then, of course, the competitive shooter, I think, is where it starts. They go, well, why don't you just write down how many MOA? And then we start understanding what MOA is, right? Minute of angle and how it interacts with the trajectory. And say, well, you don't have to have a custom turret made. All you have to know is, for 300 yards, I need 3 MOA. So just click it to 3, right? And that's, the knowledge started to expand, right? So then you're at that point. And then again, as more of the knowledge from the competitive world trickles down, or the sniper world, once they leave the military, a lot of them are now training civilians, which, it's expanding the knowledge, which I really, really appreciate. That, you got to pass it on. But people then start to realize, wait a minute, 300 yards, let's just call it 3 MOA. Or 2.5 MOA or whatever, depending on the cartridge that you have, right? But that doesn't mean it's always 3 MOA. It depends on the density, altitude, and the this and that and the other. And 300-yard shot is not that big of a deal. But if you want to really go kind of like the 100% success ratio on the shooter that wants to shoot at 600 yards, they must know that your drop at 600 yards is not always the same, depending on where you're at.
Yep. Altitude and temperature.
Humidity, temperature, all that plays part into that shot, right? Yep. And then, of course, ballistic solvers came around. You have the rangefinder, then you have the ballistic solvers that now, you have on your phone.
Who'd have thought 20 years ago people would consider a smartphone as an essential hunting tool?
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Well, even 20 years ago, we couldn't even imagine carrying a phone with us 100% of the time.
No. Yeah, even if it was just
they were that big.
Ordinary life. Let alone going out in the wilderness.
The smartphone is only 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah, that's very probably old. Right. No.
I think it was.
Yet I see all these young guys out there that they whip that phone out before they get their rifle out.
Yeah, I do F-class shooting, which is known distance, but I occasionally shoot PRS, which is multiple distance shooting. They're all technically known distance, but these guys have their own rangefinders, and the correct way to do it is to verify your own range. But the point is, they show up and they set up a tripod, and they have binoculars, they have a rangefinder, they have a Kestrel with a weather vane, they have a watch that tells them like a compass, and it has a ballistic solver in there, and they have their phone, and then they double check it with a Kestrel. I mean, they have everything, right? And obviously, in a hunting situation, it's not very practical, but for that game, it is. And these guys are extremely good at making first round impacts all the way out to, you name it, 1,200 yards. They're very good at it. They're probably the best out of all the competitive sports at making first round impacts on target.
My impression, yeah,
yeah, they're very good. PRS shooters are, I'm gonna say they're the best at that. You know,
I would say they're the best rounded because, as you said, a standard 1,000-yard shot for the F class, it's okay. It's sort of like skeet shooting. It's always the same target till you get it all figured out, and you just keep doing the same thing over and over again. But change things up like they do with the PRS stuff,
and we have sighters, so we have a big target. As long as you get on target, you're on target, and you just walk it in. And then once you walk it in, that's when you say, okay, I'm going for record. And then we have to do 20 shots inside of that 1 MOA. They don't have sighters. Their first shot counts, and they don't have to be as precise as we can, or as we have to be in F class to score well, because we have to be centered up. Right?
You're shooting groups then, huh?
Well, we're shooting for score, but the target's 1 MOA out to 1,000 yards. So not only do you have to keep all your shots inside of 1 MOA, they also have to be centered up.
Yep.
So, but again, we get sighters, and we have these very stable shooting positions and all of the above, right? Like, our game is about, I guess I'm going to say precision, because we're shooting for score, right? But you need accuracy as well, like very good accuracy to keep everything. You need both accuracy and precision. But in PRS, you also need both, but it's not as demanding. It used to not be. Now the targets are getting smaller, so these guys are getting better. They're getting so good. You
don't need a 14-inch target anymore, huh?
No, they're getting so good that, I mean, they're starting to use a lot of 1 MOA targets. But yeah, so the PRS shooters, I'm going to say, are the best, most well-rounded shooters. But yeah, they carry the really good ones. They have a lot more knowledge than the average shooter, because they need to make that first round impact, because it counts for score. That's the big difference.
Yeah, that's coming closer to what one needs in the field for hunting. If you want to roll this into hunting, it's absolutely a useful skill to have. Yeah. I just think the only thing I don't really get excited about with the PRS guys is trying to move that into hunting just to prove that they've done it, to say, oh, I shot a deer at 1,000, 1,100 yards, whatever they want to say. That's not the reason we're hunting, guys. Do that on your targets. That's great. But I just think it shows a bit of disrespect for not only the game, but our heritage as hunters. I'm not going to condemn some guy who was able to make an 800-yard shot on his deer, but I do seriously question the guys who make it a point of trying to make the shot farther rather than trying to get closer.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's and that's always been the discussion, right? What are you going to brag about on the shooting forums? And that's another thing that's been popular now, the internet, right? Yeah. We didn't have internet, so all you had to do is lie to your friends at the hunting camp, right? Now you have to lie to, and I say lie loosely. I say lie loosely, right? Obviously, it's everybody's heard the hunting stories and the fishing stories, but that's the back then. All you had to do is impress the guys at the deer camp. Now people are trying to impress millions of people online.
Well, and it's a lot easier to do because they can't see your facial expressions when you're telling your lies, so you can lie through your teeth. Like, I don't know how many guys out there that shoot one whole groups every time, all the time with their factory rifle using factory ammunition, but I hear from a lot of them.
Yeah, and then they have the when they get somebody's going to push back and they're really going to dig in their heels and I'll show you, and then that's when they go and attempt these crazy shots,
Yeah.
But it's like, what are you going to brag about? Are you going to brag about a big trophy? And that's the other. Everything just keeps advancing at a crazy pace, right? Like I remember, like back in the day when I used to hunt, like a 130, 140 class deer was a
Beauty.
beauty, was a great trophy.
Yeah.
Nowadays, everybody seems to shoot that. You
Yeah.
know,
That's just a meat buck.
exactly. And now, 160, 180s, everybody's going after those big monsters. And
Yeah.
because of, again, this back to, the suppliers, right? Because the deer, it's also supply and demand, right? The big deer. So there
Yeah.
was more demand for big deer. So now there's more of them, right?
Yeah.
There's people breeding and growing this bigger deer.
Sure.
It's never ending.
Yeah. You know what? We were talking about telling our tales and bragging in hunting camp. And of course, the classic is always you should have seen the one that got away. Everybody's biggest buck and biggest fish is the one that got away. I got to test that theory one time on a hunt in Alaska years and years ago for caribou, in which I shot this pretty good bull, and we walk over to where he should be lying, and he's not there. It's just over the shoulder of a ridge. Like, what the heck? I saw you hit him right in the shoulder. He's got to be dead. It doesn't make any sense. And then we looked way out across the tundra, and there he was, running into the trees, almost a mile away. What the hey? And his leg was broken, and we could not find that animal. It's like, holy mackerel! I wonder what happened. I don't know, but he got away. We felt terrible. About 3 days later, we see him come out of the trees, pretty much the same place he went in, limping with that leg thing, like, and feeding. Well, I'll be darned, that's him. Well, I've got to finish him off. Well, he's coming closer. So we closed the distance. He closed the distance. We got within about 300 yards, and he was facing me. So I shot between his antlers and got him right in the base of the back and dropped him there. And that first shot had just nicked the leg to sort of break the tendon right at the bend there,
Mm-hmm.
and never got into the chest. A little bit low, as I recall. But in the meantime, I had two tags. So in the meantime, I had shot another caribou that was pretty good. And I remember when I shot it, the guide saying, yeah, this is a nice one, but man, it's nothing like that one that got away. Well, now we had both racks, and the one that got away that everybody remembered as being so much bigger, his rack fit inside of the other one that I'd shot.
Wow. Well,
So one's memory trend tends to play a few tricks on him from time to time.
well, you're excited. It's that buck fever. I'll tell you what. If there's somebody out there that's never experienced fever, it is very addicting and it is incredible. It's. I still remember it to this day. I'm. It's There's not many things like it. It's
Yeah.
pretty incredible stuff.
Maybe that first kiss from your first girlfriend.
It's pretty amazing, and I think everybody should at least experience it once. It's one of those things that it's quite amazing.
I don't know how you could not experience it more than once. I remember as a kid getting so excited about things where you're shaking so bad you can't shoot and you can't draw your bow and all this stuff. I was fortunate that my first two deer were running flat out, because then I didn't have time to stand there and shake. It was like, let's get this job done. And I'd done a lot of shooting with a 22 rimfire on jackrabbits as a kid growing up. So I was fairly experienced at that. And I was able to get those two deer running flat out. Both of them had already been shot at by other people,
Mm-hmm.
and they were running by me. And I was able to make that shot. If they had been standing still, I would have shook too much to make that shot.
What was your? Do you recall? I know you do. That time where you were shaking so bad that you're probably amazed that you pulled that shot off.
Which one? There were so many. I mean, it literally took me years to get over buck fever. I had to force myself. And there were several times. And sometimes it was just a doe. I can remember a mule deer doe one time, and I think I may have even been lying prone, and I was shaking so bad I could not keep the crosshair on that doe at about 200 yards. It was just, you had to stop and put the gun down and get a hold of yourself. I had a buddy one time I was guiding on a pronghorn hunt. We both had tags and found this good buck that he wanted. And he started breathing heavily. And I was right beside him. And I said, "Hey, man, just calm down. Take your time. He's not going anywhere." He was shaking so bad he couldn't hit the side of the hill. He finally crawled up to a fence post and had to wrap his arms around that fence post to calm himself down enough and steady that shot. He made it, but oh my gosh, I had never seen a worse case of buck fever, but he was sure having fun.
It's pretty incredible. My first deer, my dad put me on a top of a tree, and he's like, climb up there, and the deer they walk through here. We're hunting does. We're just hunting for meat. My dad would not let me shoot a buck on the first time out. Like, you're shooting does, right? So anyway, we needed meat, so we went out, and he's like, climb up here, and they're gonna walk through here. Just get ready. I had a 30-30 with a 4X scope, and sure enough, I was up there since dark, and about 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd been up there about 2.5 hours. Here they come, and I wish they had been running because they were walking so slow and they were grazing, and I'm just going, oh man, and from when you're from a tree, right? You're shooting down, number one, and two, there's branches and limbs and everything is there, and you have these openings in which you can shoot, and that's it, right? And if they go too far, now you can't turn that way. So before the deer appeared, I was trying to figure out where can I shoot, and then I'm watching them, and sometimes they'd walk, and sometimes there was bucks there too, so they run them off, and sometimes they run and then they stop, and then I'm just nervous. I'm a nervous wreck, and long story short, I was lucky enough to make the shot, and she shot the doe. She ran maybe 20 yards. I could see her paw, just fold over, and that's it. I got off the tree. My dad came over. It was a good old time, just great time. But oh man, I was nervous, very nervous.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think it was John Madsen. He was a writer worked for Winchester back in this probably the 50s and 60s. A heck of a writer, just a evocative writer who could really capture what we all feel inside. And he once told me that the day he stops getting buck fever, or at least a little bit of it, is when he's going to quit hunting, because it's just such an addictive part of the experience. It's sort of like the hunter's high when you see you. And as I mentioned earlier, even on does, you get it, at least as a young man. But I will still occasionally get excited like that, even on a doe, just because I know, okay, I've decided I'm going to shoot this one now. And that little bit of nervous energy kicks up again. Your heart starts to beat faster, and you think, I'm just shooting a doe, for gosh sake. What is the big deal here? But it's just something instinctive, I think, in the predatory animal. And I think you see it in videos of cats stalking, and they're sort of quivering, and they make a little bit of a move and a quiver, and the tail just a little bit. I think they've got that same nervous energy in them that we do when we get buck fever.
I think the thing about buck fever, or any
Doe
fever,
fever.
is deep down, you can miss.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you had 100% confidence that you're going to make that shot and the deer's not going to move and everything's going to be perfect, it'd be an easy shot, just like shooting the target.
Yeah.
But
and I think the fact that that deer could move in any second really exacerbates the problem, because you really can't shoot yet because it's not a perfect position. But if you don't, you might not get any position. It might just bolt. And you've seen it happen. There's a buck standing right there, and all of a sudden he decides he wants to chase that doe, and you go, dang it, that was my best shot, and I didn't take it. So then you end up rushing the next one.
yeah, you have paralysis by analysis, right? Because you're like, this shot, it's pretty good, but I'm just going to wait for it to get better.
Yeah.
And then that's it. Like you said, it runs off, and now it becomes a shot or no shot, versus before it was a good shot versus a perfect shot.
Yep.
And then once your brain goes there, now you're getting even more excited. You know now there's a possibility that you're not going to get a shot at all, and it's going to be the one that got away. And now in your mind, it's the one that's about to get away, and the
Yeah.
rack gets bigger. You get
Yep.
more nervous. It's
Yep.
amazing. Hunting is amazing.
Yep.
But you just got to get out there and try it.
Yeah. Um, question is, will you ever get tired of? Now, you said you don't hunt anymore, which really surprises me because I can't get over it. When fall comes around, especially, the memories build up, the fall colors, the crisper temperatures. Your body just suggests that it's time to get ready for winter. I always equate it with gathering wood for the winter and getting your house buttoned down and all. This stuff is coming and you have to prepare for it. The same as nature does. The trees are getting ready for winter by shedding their leaves. The geese are flying south. The squirrels are fattening up and burying nuts and all that stuff. Everybody's getting ready for the shortage. And I think that's what drives, to a large degree, our hunting instinct. We want to prepare, we want to get that meat in the freezer or in the canning jars or dried or however we store it, because it's not going to be easy to hunt in January with 3 feet of snow and 30 below, or at least where I grew up.
Well, I'm in Texas, so.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it.
But I don't hunt. However, I still take people hunting. I enjoy that more. I Again, and because I hunt in Texas, we hunt over deer feeders and things of that nature. It's not, I don't get that buck fever anymore. That's why I don't hunt. It's just not there anymore. It's not exciting.
Yeah, so
I
imagine it, right?
Yeah, the possibility of me missing is next to nothing now, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I have literally the best gear, the best everything, and I'm sitting in a deer blind with, you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
over a deer feeder.
Yeah. So
Having
then it
said
just
that,
becomes it's almost like gathering wood for the winter literally at that point, you're just gathering meat for the winter.
right? So however, I have been considering going back out there and going for elk, because
I
that
was just
is
going to yes, I was just going to suggest that you go for wilder game and/or bigger game. It seems to me like the
yeah.
country you're in is just too easy
It's going to
with
be
those feeders
one
and
of two
stuff.
things are going to happen. Maybe both. I'm probably going to start going out Colorado, New Mexico, and just go after elk. I used to do that. That's how I got into long range hunting, but that's a whole other story. But I'm gonna go back out and start chasing elk again, because that's out in the wild, right? Like now, that's hunting. You have to walk around, you have to stalk, you have to do all of the above. And I may also get into bow hunting to again to bring that thrill back of
Yeah.
you have to set up totally different for that. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't have any experience with that, so that may be a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, well, it is. It really intensifies all of those feelings you had. And if you had fever with a rifle, wait till you do it with a bow. I started out bow hunting as a kid because it was against the law to have a firearm until you were 16, unless there was an adult with you. And back in those days, the adults were all working. The kids just kind of, go do your own thing. So I found out that you could bow hunt deer without having your parents along. So I got a bow and went out bow hunting by myself that way and had the buck fever stuff. And I used to just absolutely love bow hunting because you were so close. It was such an intimate way to hunt. You had to get in those days within 35, 40 yards at most of a deer to make a shot. And I had to get out of it, oh gosh, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago because of rotator cuff injury. Couldn't draw the bow anymore. So I reluctantly gave it up, but I still missed that intensity of that hunt. And then I found out that I could use a crossbow, which I'd never really even considered. They're such big, clunky things. But friends were saying, yeah, come on, like we can crossbow hunt. And that way you get to hunt the earlier season, you get more time in field and all the usual reasons. So I picked up a 10-point crossbow that, gosh, what is it? 505 Nitro, I think it's called. It throws a supposedly throws an arrow 505 feet per second, which is crazy. So you can shoot out to 70, 80 yards with that thing with a dead on hold if you can get your sight adjusted. Similar to a rifle, they put scopes on them, and all the hash lines are on there conforming to different distances. And I was practice shooting with that thing, and I could hit a 2-inch circle at 70 yards with that. So I went hunting last fall in Kansas during the bow season, which I hadn't done for a long, long time. And all of that came back. I was hunting with an outfitter, big Kansas whitetails, and this guy had everything groomed up and ready to go. He had his stands already up. He'd actually done the hunting. I was just there to shoot the deer, but it was still crazy exciting because you're sitting all hidden quietly and things come along and you're watching all this action close up. Turkeys are feeding all around you. And then the big buck comes in and took him with that first arrow kill critter I've had in, like I say, probably 25 years. So you want to give that a try, whether you're using a regular bow or compound bow or a crossbow. That bow hunting is pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that. I think that's what I'm gonna do. But yeah, I remember some of my best memories were made in the field with my dad, my brother. You know, every Thanksgiving, I remember every Thanksgiving that was our thing. We go hunting.
Yeah.
And hey, just good times. They're hard to beat those memories. They're just it's hard to top those. But so what about elk and bigger? What's your go-to rifle or cartridge for that?
I have thought about that a long, long time. I am not an adherent of having the biggest hammer in the box to kill an elk because I know too many people who've killed them with 22 250s and 243s, and I've done it with 270s and I don't know what all. 325 WSM, 300 SAUM, 30-06. There's 284. Took a nice 6-point bull with a 284 once, and I really haven't noticed a huge difference as long as you put the right bullet in the right place. But if push came to shove and you said what would be sort of the epitome of the elk cartridge for you, I probably would have to go with the 338 Win Mag.
Okay.
I think that is an excellent compromise, just as the 7s are, I think, for you and me, a good compromise for deer and animals of that size. I think you do get maybe a little bit of an advantage with that slightly larger caliber. Not that I think the initial hole has all that much to do with terminal effect, but it certainly can't hurt. More is better, but not absolutely better. But the additional bullet weight helps with your penetration and all the rest. And it's a big animal. So, and I can still handle the recoil to where I'm not flinching with the 338. And it's a 30-06 length action. So, yeah. And I could just as happily do it, I think, with the 30-06. But hey, 225 grain bullet, 338 Win Mag, that'd be the way I'd roll.
Yeah, and that's the beauty about picking 2 or 3 different cartridges depending on your needs, right? Because if you had only one, then obviously that would change the criteria, right? It changed. If you only could have one, it'd be hard to say, oh, I'm going to shoot a 338 for everything, right? So
yeah,
you always have to. There's always compromise, but if you had more than one arrow in your quiver, then it's it's always better.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you got that right.
What's I guess elk. I'm not very familiar with game. What's the toughest animal? I mean, I hear elk is pretty tough. I have yet to get one.
Yes, elk are pretty tough. I hear nilgai, like you have down in Texas, that antelope from India, are unusually tough. I've only shot a couple of them. 300, I think it was a WSM. Maybe it was a Win Mag, but I probably was using a 180 grain bullet. I don't even remember anymore. And I hit this bull square on the shoulder and broke it hard. And he took off running. I may have even broken both shoulders, and he somehow managed to run 50 yards before he expired. I thought that was showing some extreme toughness and durability. And the other one I shot was just a female. Shot her behind the shoulder, and she ran a short distance, fell over, nothing spectacular there. Then a buddy of mine shot one, which what he shot thought was a good chest shot might have been a little bit high, and that thing ran off, and he never did find it. So I hear a lot of stories about them being particularly tough. But then you consider, we'll say, African animals and buffalo and whatnot, and you hear about how a Cape buffalo will take all these hits from big bore so-called stopping rifles, which I don't believe is an accurate description at all, because if you can shoot one 8 times with a 416 or 458 lot or something and it keeps coming, it's obviously not stopping it.
Yep.
But those are fairly tough, and yet I've only shot what, three Cape buffalo, and I think I've used I shot four. At any rate, I used 5 shots to do four, or 4 shots to do three. Mm-hmm. In other words, they didn't prove to be all that tough. One and done. And now one of my brain shots, so that was obvious, but the others were chest shots. And I didn't have the rodeo that so many people report, but that's not to say that certainly don't happen, because obviously they do. But I do think that's a fairly tough animal, but then they're so big, that always factors in. Moose, you don't see that with. I'll shoot a moose and it'll stay on its feet for a long time. I always say that it takes them a long time to realize they're dead. It's not that first shot didn't kill them, it's just that animals have to bleed out, essentially. Mm-hmm. The blood pressure drops, and then the brain's not functioning anymore, and they fall over from fainting from low blood pressure, and then they eventually die from no oxygenated blood to the brain. Well, with an animal the size of a moose and a 30 caliber bullet, it's going to have a longer period before that happens, I think, than a smaller animal would. I can't guarantee that, but it's the way I read it. But I've killed moose with 120 grain 264 bullets, single shot. When you put it in the right place, you just have to give him time to realize that he's dead and run out of blood pressure, and then they fall over. Coyotes can be remarkably tough. I think you've probably seen that. But then, I don't know, if you don't hit whatever game is in the vitals and it gets excited and the adrenaline starts to flow, I think most things can keep going and keep going. I mean, I had a chicken last year. A friend's dog came over and started ravaging that poor chicken. And I found the chicken with the skin from its back line clear down its thigh had been ripped over by that dog, but it was still there. So I picked that skin up and I just took sewing thread and sewed it. And 2 weeks later, that chicken was back to business. Wow. It survived, no antibiotics or anything. I mean, that's how tough animals are, and I shot a deer one time that had a broadhead stuck in its mandibles, in its face like this. It hit him and gone in and stuck against the other mandible, and it was still able to breathe, eat, function, and it had been doing that for at least a month. I talked to the guy he thought he'd hit it in the neck or something. And he saw the deer and he said, yeah, that was the one I shot at. It looks pretty much like the same one, little 4-pointer. But that's how tough things are. And you've heard plenty of stories like that where you find animals with 3 legs or a bullet or an arrow embedded somewhere in their body, and they survive it without modern medicine, no treatment at all. It's just nature healing things up. They can all be tough.
It's I agree. The animals. I've seen the whole time I hunted, the most animals that I did not recover were coyotes. I was hitting them with pretty big rifles, and they'd bolt, and they're fast. Yeah. They're quick. They were out of there. And I'm sure they expired somewhere, but Number one, they run off, right? And number two, I didn't really care to look for them, right? But many of them did not just simply drop. And that's a pretty small animal.
Yeah. Yeah, they can be really, really tough. I always looked long and hard for mine because I was selling the fur. Mm. And it was pretty hard to not get that fur once you knew you'd hit that dog, So I would look pretty hard. But then they're a small animal. They don't leave big tracks in general. And they can hide in some pretty small little patches of cover, so they are difficult to recover. But you're right. I mean, I've shot some with a 300 Win Mag and had them run off. I found them, but they covered a good 30, 40 yards.
I think what that tells you, and you know this, but bullet construction needs to be such that it matches what you're hunting, right? Because a 338 or even heck, you can shoot them with a 50 caliber, but if the bullet doesn't expand, you could have done more damage with a 223 with a
Yeah,
ballistic tip.
explosive bullet.
Yeah.
Right.
So you touched on the guy or the hunter that missed that deer or shot him in the jaw because he went for the neck. What's your take on neck shots and head shots? And
Oh, yeah, good question. I'm really against headshots. I know the guys who take them and insist that it's the absolute best are going to hate me for this, but it's reality. The head is the first thing and the quickest thing to move. Deer is looking calm and something catches its attention, and just that quickly the head spun around. The chest didn't. The neck did to a degree, but the closer you get to the chest, the less the movement is there. So to me, the chest is the biggest vital zone. You've got the heart lung area covering a good 10 inches or more. And if you shoot a little bit high, you've got the spine, so you can really extend that up to 12, sometimes even 14 inches, depending on the animal. But it's just a much bigger target to give you a little bit of fudge factor for any of those anomalies that pop up, whether it was you or the rifle didn't shoot as well as it usually does, or the animal moved. But with the head, and then the other thing is that the head target is so small that you can miss by a fraction of an inch and that animal can escape wounded. And I have seen a few deer running around with their jaws shot off. And I have seen some, well, I watched one with a young man, took a shot, didn't account for wind deflection, and hit the deer in the head, dropped it instantly. I'm like, wow. But something didn't quite look right to me, and I had a spotting scope on that deer. And I said to this boy, get another round in and be ready just in case. A lot of times when they drop just like that, it's a stun shot, and they'll get up. So be ready to shoot again. And this time, hold about 9 inches into the wind. So he was sitting there ready, and it's probably a minute, and I could see that deer breathing because of that 60 power scope. And I said, he is still breathing, so you've probably crippled him with a spine shot or just got underneath the spine, and he could get up. So let's just be ready to put another shot in him. And about then, this thing got up. So we finished him off, and we went over there, and that first shot had hit him under the brain pan, above the jaw, and just missed getting into the actual skull and brain part of it. Obviously knocked him. Now, this was a 30-06 with a 150 grain bullet. And guys who talk about, you got to have a lot of energy to kill your animal. This is another one of those incidents that tells me, it's not energy that kills. I mean, if energy killed with a bullet that close to the brain of a little old deer with that much energy from a 30-06, and it got up again after taking that shot that close to the brain. Why didn't that energy kill it? So that's another one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of headshots on deer.
I'm not either. My dad taught me just shoot behind the shoulder. Whatever, you're gonna lose more meat if the deer gets away than if you shoot them behind the shoulder.
Excellent point. Yep. You're going to lose a couple pounds of meat with a shoulder shot, or we're going to lose 180 pounds.
Yeah. So, and even as I became a competitive shooter, I would always shoot behind the shoulder or high shoulder, but never shoulder. I mean, never neck or head, especially not head. But anyway, it's I know every single topic I think that you and I have covered today, it's a controversial one because there's it's just the nature of it,
Yeah, sure is.
I'm a pretty boring hunter, or I used to be. People always would ask me, "Oh man, you're a competitive shooter. You probably shot nothing but headshots." I'm like, "No, just behind the shoulder." But yeah, it's fun. I think the advancements are amazing, and they keep going. You're never going to run out of this versus that the way things are going, because it seems like there's a new cartridge every few months. Hornady's really pumping out cartridges.
Yeah, they found the recipe. 30-degree shoulder, straight walls, plenty of length for that bullet, fast twist barrels. It's not a mystery anymore. Yeah, they've got that system. So they've got what, the 6.5 PRC, the 7 PRC, the 300 PRC. Gonna need a 22 PRC yet, and a 24 PRC,
I,
and
I'm thinking about. I literally at Shot Show I was talking to some of the varmint hunters, and I told him, I said, what is it, 60, however many years later, I don't think there's still anything that beats the 220 Swift as the king of the speed hill.
yeah, there are a couple of them that can do it with the right bullet, but that was in 1935 when that thing came out.
Yeah, almost
We're
100
coming up
years.
90 years.
Yeah, 90 years. And that's what I mean, right? So I told him, I said, it's going to be on my channel. I'm probably going to do a project, maybe call it Need for Speed or something. And because, I build my own rifles and all. So I'd say, you know what, I might just build the 22 PRC. Just take the 6.5 PRC, neck it down to 22, and just
See
I
what
don't care.
happens.
I don't care if the barrel lasts 500 rounds. I just want to beat the 220 Swift because that is a fast little thing, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And yet it's such a goofy old fashioned cartridge design. It's really sloped and shoulders are
Oh, the
sloped and
taper's crazy. Everything
paper is
everything
nothing.
is, you know, big taper on the body. You
Yep.
know, shallow taper on
Shoulders.
the shoulders. The
Yeah.
bullet seated way deep in there. I mean, you could
Yep.
you could take the 220 Swift and modernize it, put a 30-degree shoulder, minimize the body taper, and extend
Yeah.
that bullet out, and all of a sudden you have this new hot rod that in reality it's just an updated 220 Swift.
Well, something I've never paid attention to is the 220 Ackley improved, but I'll bet you he did all that.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's been done, uh, and it's. But again, then there's no such thing as a free lunch. Then it's like, well, the barrel life is bad.
Of course.
Yeah, but of course, you can't have it all. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, a 220 Swift is one of those that when I got into it, I was like, I'm gonna get me one of those, and then I ended up just doing the 22 250 Ackley improved because
Yeah.
I think I could match the performance of a 220 Ackley.
Yeah.
And the 22 250 is much more plentiful in components and available data and all that good
Yeah. And
stuff.
then I think your brass lasts a little longer. You don't have as much neck trimming to do.
Yeah.
That 220 Swift does neck trim city on that baby.
I tell you what, I guarantee you could take a 220 Swift, put a 6.5 bullet in it or a 7 millimeter, and it'd make a great deer cartridge.
Oh, yeah.
It's just about anything nowadays. But
Now, with today's bullets, I think you just leave it at 220 Swift and put those bullets on. You got a great deer cartridge.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Ron, this has been amazing, my friend. I haven't talked hunting in a long time, and you brought back so many good memories.
Well, I think the deer better start worrying then if you're going to get back into it.
Well, it ain't gonna be with a rifle. More likely, I've been really considering bow, so I'm probably gonna start looking into that. I'm going so far. I'm going in reverse big time. I at Chacho, the one thing that excited me out of I walked that entire thing. I was putting in 8 miles a day roughly, and I
Mhm.
walked the whole thing, and I saw pretty much everything that was there. And the thing that excited me the most was air rifles. So I'm getting an air rifle, and now I'm talking about getting a bow.
Yeah, you're going to get spears next.
Yeah, exactly. Rocks and it's
Slingshot.
yeah, slingshots. But it's I think at some point it becomes like I said, I'm a rifle shooter. I shoot 1,000 yards like all the time. More than I shoot when I'm training. I probably shoot about 10,000 rounds a year
Wow.
at 1,000 yards, right? So that's more than anybody or most people will ever do in a lifetime, right? And I do it every year. And so yeah, hunting with a rifle at 100 yards over a deer feeder becomes pretty
Yeah.
boring, I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
So, but I think the bow, is something new, something that I think it's gonna spark backyard.
Yeah, take a few deer with a bow at close range, and you'll get a little bit of the excitement back. And then try a pronghorn, stalking it, not sitting at a water hole from a blind, but stalking it. That is a hoot.
Wow, I haven't even considered that with a rifle. I think it'd be hard with a rifle, much less with a bow.
No, you can do it with a bow. I never hit one with a bow, but I surely got within range where I should have hit one. But oh my gosh, are they sharp? It's just a treat to get in with the range, stalking range of one. You just talk about buck fever.
Wow. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds very challenging. That sounds like it's going to take a lot of my time to
Yeah,
get
it'll take some time.
to get good at hunting with a bow, especially an animal as elusive as that.
Yeah, the closer you get, the harder it is. They just, you get within that flight or fight distance of an animal like that, and they're so attuned to it. You can get away with a lot at 100 yards and beyond because their attention, all their senses are riveted around them within striking distance of, say, a cougar or something that's running after them. Not us throwing things at them, but they're still paying that kind of attention. That's when they hear the slide of the arrow across the rest or any little sound that you make. I was amazed while I was hunting them with a bow what they would detect. But if you do everything right, you can get a shot off. You just have to not have buck fever when you do it. So you're not shaking too much.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, for me anyway.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. This has been amazing. Thank you for
Oh, it's been fun.
taking
Fun
me back.
visiting with you, Eric.
Thank you for taking me back down memory lane of when I used to hunt.
Yeah. Well, hey, would you mind if I called you sometime? We did a interview for my podcast.
Nah, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. I
Hey,
I
that'd be
think it'd be
fun.
fun.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. We'll introduce some of my audience to a long range shooter.
yeah, especially one that started because of hunting. But
Yeah.
we'll talk about that on your podcast. But that's how I got into long range shooting, and then I still haven't left. But hunting is still in my background, and I'm gonna get back to it for sure.
Yeah. Well, it remains my passion. I just have to be out there connecting with nature. So, all right.
All right,
Good talking to you,
thank
Eric.
you, Ron. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
sir.